Welcome to Refreshed. I'm Ana Diaz, and Refreshed is a show. I just totally messed it up. It's fine. Welcome to Refreshed, a show where we highlight the wonderful people's projects and ideas on the internet. Today, I have with me Petrana Radulovic. Petrana, you are an entertainment writer at Polygon.com, former desk mate, and you're just and not just at Polygon, you've been at Mashable and some other places, just really committed to the entertainment beat. So welcome.
Thank you.
So I'd actually kind of be curious if you were interested in just talking a little bit more about your work. I know you had a really cool path at Polygon where you really started on the video game side, but now you're just completely, for the most part, you're pretty much all on the entertainment side. So what are you doing these days?
So these days I have a animation column which I do I try to do it every 2 weeks, but things happen. But where I explore these movies from the late 90s and early 2000s, which were all box office flops, but that the fandom still loves. So that's my big project. But I primarily write a lot of animation stuff. I will review animated shows and movies. That's definitely my main area of interest. But I also reviewing. I review a lot of shows that appeal to teen girls. I think I would say a big focus of my beat is, and then also just random news like Mulan being pulled from release cals.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that happened at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, which I quickly wrote up before.
Oh my gosh! Oh
yeah, it's not coming out anymore for the foreseeable future.
Wow, that's huge news.
Yeah.
So, did you get it? What did you find with that? I mean, I'm sure it was just maybe a...
That was a deadline report thing, just because no theaters are open, and these studios still have release dates for August, and it's just come on, guys, we know that nothing's going to change in 3 weeks.
Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, just because you write about this a lot, do you think that that's the right move? I mean, on the other side, Disney Plus put Hamilton on and Frozen 2 on early. How would you even go about handling this right now?
I mean, their only option is because the thing about these movies, a lot of people are just being oh, why don't you just put it on Disney Plus? Or because a few studios have done put their movies on digital download. There was Scoob and Trolls World Tour was that first one. Mm-hmm. But the thing about the Disney releases is they're banking especially with Mulan and Black Widow and any Marvel title, they're banking on these being billion-dollar movies, and you're just not going to get that same revenue if you make it available on digital. They would have to dramatically adjust their expected budgets for everything, and they're already losing so much money theme park wise.
Oh yeah. So. Yeah, it's just probably, I mean, I never thought I'd say this, it's probably a bad time for Disney right now.
It's so terrifying that they opened Disney World right when Florida is just getting crazy right now.
Well, and you would have something to say to that because you are from Florida and you know the Disney parks really well.
I do.
So did you follow that coverage? / did you hear any stories?
So there's this Reddit thread circulating around, and I don't know how accurate it is, but it's an employee from a park, and they did not specify if it was Universal or Disney, just because they don't want HR on their ass. Where they were a bunch of us are sick, and the company won't let us say anything, which is just really scary. I've heard a few of the theme park reporters I do follow have been saying that when they went for that people were pretty good with complying with the mask rules and stuff, but there's just so much that could go wrong.
Yeah,
that it's just scary to think about too much.
Yeah. Oof. And I mean, it's scary because it's I mean, for some people it's oh, Disney's kind of this abstract thing, but I feel in Florida it really is interwoven with so many people's day-to-day lives. I'm also noticing in the chat that the sound is a little off. I just did a little fix, so hopefully that's all good. And we'll be more imbalanced here. Just wanted to acknowledge that. One of our watchers, one of our viewers made an interesting comment was that Adam Howard said Disney stock, on the other hand, is making a good comeback. So I do wonder then, it's like not a great time, obviously, for like any company right now, I would say, but comparatively, just because like Disney's such this like ginormous, like company that they are big enough to be fine and even still grow.
And yeah, you have a lot of people turning to streaming now, and especially like Hamilton coming out on Disney Plus was such a good move on their part, because all these people I know who would not care about Disney Plus started like subscribing, and they took away their like 1 week free trial thing.
Yeah.
Like, right before that, so you had to sign up for at least a month.
Yeah. And I watch, this is like, I feel like this is like the third piece of MinnMax content that Hamilton has come up on. But now because of that, like I have to ask, what are your Hamilton thoughts? Are you like a big Hamilton fan? And what?
So yeah. I came to Hamilton, so like in 2015, everyone I knew was obsessed with Hamilton, and then just like out of the principle of like, everyone's into this, I'm not going to be into it. It took me like until the next summer to listen to it, and I liked it. I saw it on tour, and I enjoy it. It's like one of those things where like it got like really oversaturated, and I was like, ugh. But then like you hear like there was that one trailer that came around for the Disney Plus thing that had the Satisfied instrumentals on it, and I was like, oh, this is catchy.
Yeah. Well, okay, and this ties into what we're talking about, which is like internet fandoms of like movies, animation specifically. I have just been like the Lin-Manuel Miranda, like I guess the Rick rolls, I guess you describe it. So like for our viewers who aren't familiar with this, like there's this new thing where like teens will insert like this really kind of, for lack of a better word, derpy photo of Lin-Manuel Miranda like into their content. So like one day I'm like very comfortably in like the furthest corner of the internet for me, which is like volleyball anime, and all of a sudden I'm scrolling through and it's like, I don't know, it's like 10 favorite moments with Sugawara, and then all of a sudden it goes to Lin-Manuel Miranda. Like, no. Like it knows no ends, like that specifically. Yeah, and I think Palmer tweeted about this recently too.
Yeah, I told her. It reminds me. So like back in like 2015. So like I'm just going to like Tumblr fandom here because that's what I'm familiar with. But like people were like really into John Green in the early 2010s, and then in 2015 everyone just started dunking on him. Like it was like this point of like he just got so popular that people were finding really dumb things to get mad at him about. Like I think there was one interview clip where he was like, I wrote the end of my book and it was really sad, it made me cry, and people were like canceling him for that, for lack of better word. And then so I was like, yeah, people are like dunking on Lin-Manuel, not in as exactly the same malicious way, but then Palmer pointed out that it's sort of also like how they approached Misha Collins in like 2013, where they would just put his face everywhere on the internet. So it's this weird hybrid of like, I don't think they have as much affection for him as they did with Misha Collins, but they don't have as much disdain for him as they do with John Green. So it's this weird hybrid crowd.
we're blazing new paths here with internet fandom and Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's just like, it goes to show, in my mind, I see that and I'm like, oh man, the internet will punish anyone who's like earnest enough. Which is a sad way of looking at it. Also, like, if there's one group that you don't want to upset, it's like young teenage girls. So like, what would you say then? Like, what is your favorite? You know, you were in the Tumblr era, so like me too. But I think we're probably, I don't know, maybe we're in the same spaces. We haven't even really talked about Tumblr. Like, where were you at as like far as fandoms go, and like what movies were you interacting, and like what were you sort of seeing?
So for me, it was definitely a lot of like animation and Disney stuff, and that's where a lot of my fandom days came from. And auxiliary like Harry Potter stuff, but that like I feel like Harry Potter was just like everywhere in the internet in the 2010s and early 2000s. But it was definitely that, and this was like before the MCU was a huge thing. But I was kind of like on the fringes of like, oh, I like Marvel movies, I guess. But I was not into like the like. I'm sorry for speaking this out loud, super hulock. I actually did not, like, I watched some Doctor Who, but I wasn't, like, one of those people who was, like, super into all three of them at the same time.
Yeah. Which is, like, a lot of Doctor Who to be into at one time.
Yeah.
So it was, like, Disney animation. Were there... So now I'm curious, because it's, like... So you wrote an article on basically how... I always mix up if it's like the Path to El Dorado, about how that was sort of like an overlooked movie, and it's not Disney, by the way, in case like the chat's wondering. So the Path to El Dorado came out, sort of was slept on, I guess you would say, and then sort of saw like a resurgence, or found like it took on like a new role with internet culture. Can you sort of talk about that a little more?
Yes. So I mentioned this at the beginning with this series of articles I'm doing about animated movies in the 2000s. It was just like this weird, wild landscape where this is like right when DreamWorks came to be. And if you don't know, DreamWorks was started by a former Disney executive, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who just like left on like, there's a whole mess. You could read about it in the book, but like a lot of DreamWorks was started to be petty to Disney, which makes Shrek like, just 10 times more hilarious.
Wait, okay. What was one of the more interesting stories? Do you remember? Like,
so the whole thing was like he wanted to be CEO, but then there was like a helicopter crash, and some other person got. It's a very tragic, involved story. But just know that like everyone wanted to cash in on the Disney Renaissance, because they were making lots of money. So Warner Animation tried its hand at stuff. Jeffrey Katzenberg spun off his own studio. But the problem was, I think people were like getting tired of the Disney Renaissance movies, because they were getting like, they were like super duper popular, and then like with each subsequent big musical hurrah, they were getting less and less money. And so they were trying to figure out like, okay, what is the next thing? Like, what is the next trend? And so you see Disney doing stuff like Treasure Planet, and to being more like sci-fi adventure, and that didn't quite hit the mark. And then you have these comedies, which are like The Road to El Dorado, and then Disney also had one which was also set in South America, The Emperor's New Groove, which is one of those things where like we can never really know if Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was at Disney at the time that was being developed, was like, hey, let's also do this. But and they didn't do well. Especially El Dorado specifically tanked, and it got like a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is and that fact surprises a lot of people, because I don't know about you, but like this is a movie I grew up watching like over and over again on DVD, and it's just like it's hilarious, and we've seen it in so many GIF sets online, especially like there's so many out of context moments that have just been turned into GIFs. You have that like both is good, that one with them screaming. There's that GIF of him playing the guitar. And I don't think people realize that it just didn't land. And the thing is, it's just so tonally different from a lot of animated movies that came before. Even DreamWorks before that, they had Prince of Egypt, which is this big, sweeping series musical. Yeah.
And how did Prince of Egypt do? Do you know?
I think that one did pretty well. And then they were like definitely trying to find their footing, and they had Ants, which is like a really brass, like almost adult themed comedy, written by Woody Allen, which we'll just acknowledge. But it's very like those two movies were like very different, and El Dorado seems to be like caught in the middle of them, in that it really wanted to be a musical, but they didn't really. There's like one song where they sing through, but then the rest of it is like they got Elton John, and there's a lot of like montages where people are just doing things. And then it didn't do well, but the thing that did do well and kind of just, I think, set the tone for animation of the next decade was Shrek, which was like literally just like, let's dunk on Disney for 90 minutes or however long the runtime of that movie is. And I think that really shifted it. And then audiences were like, oh, we want like funny movies that are kind of like self-referential and like make fun of pop culture. And then you have this next decade of 10 years where like DreamWorks was actually doing pretty decently, and then Disney's doing stuff like Brother Bear and Home on the Range.
Also forgotten. I don't even know what Home on the Range is, to be honest.
It's the last traditionally animated one they did before Princess and the Frog, and it like kind of just died off, and then they pivoted to like CG and like clunkered along, and it was like Frozen, honestly, that like revived Disney.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I was even thinking like, okay, it's interesting that you said that like people were like at this time sort of getting a little tired of like the Disney formula. Because and then there was sort of this restart with Frozen. And I would you say that we're almost like there again a little bit?
Here's the thing, even with like Frozen and Moana, which are more sweeping Disney musicals similar to the Renaissance, they have this like sort of self-aware thing in that they're like holding back because they don't want to be like that, because you have these moments in Frozen like when like Anna gets engaged to Hans, and then Elsa's like, you can't marry a man you just met, and then like there's that moment in Moana where Maui dunks on her and calls her a princess, and that whole scene in the second Wreck-It Ralph where they go to like the Disney website and they're just like making fun of themselves and almost this like, haha, we're in on the joke way, like. So I really don't know, and I hope not, because their next movie is like set in Southeast Asia, and it looks to be like a big sweeping, almost earnest epic, and I really want it to be good.
Yeah.
Although I guess I won't find out till next year. But...
Yeah, next year, maybe the year after. Who knows? It's so funny though. Like now, I feel like you're prompting me to rethink like DreamWorks in another way now too, where I'm like, oh, like. I don't know. I rewatched Shrek from a viewer in Discord, long story, part of it, not all of it. But like it got me thinking like, wow, this like movie is like a little smart, you know, like at least it's again, like it's commenting on something, it's aware. That's like pretty cool. But now like hearing you, I'm like, wow, DreamWorks was very petty. I saw a comment, where does back of the barnyard fall into this?
Is that DreamWorks or is that Sony? I cannot remember. I think it might be DreamWorks.
I think it's DreamWorks.
Okay, yeah, there were so many DreamWorks CG movies that were like built on the premise of like, oh, this is like a funny riff thing. Let's be a little self-referential. And the thing DreamWorks does, which Disney never did in the past, but has been starting to do, is they tended to get like pretty big actors. The leading roles, and like that was not something that was very popular in animation at all. I think the big pivot was actually Aladdin with Robin Williams, and then people started being like, oh, because voice actors did animation essentially, and now you have like Zendaya as Michi. And you have these
Zendaya is Michi though, which is an example of that.
That they like bill on the voice cast, which is a weird thing, even though they're like not voice actors. And then like I don't know if you this is something I was like auxiliarily aware of, but so when Scoob came out, like Scooby Doo is obviously a very long running cartoon, and there are these voice actors that have been voicing these characters for decades, and they didn't ask them to come for that movie. They put, I think it was Zac Efron Fred, and it was like. I know Gina Rodriguez was Velma, and Amanda Seyfried was Daphne. And so the actors who have played these characters for years were just like, I can't even watch this movie because I feel so betrayed that you just recast me. Yeah,
I saw that on Twitter. Do you think like the fans, did you notice like how fans responded to that at all?
I think so. It's like one of those things where people plugged into animation will be like aware of it and like upset about it, and then people who are just like, oh, these are fun movies, probably won't even realize that like Grey DeLise, who is like a very famous voice actress and has voiced Daphne for like a while now, wasn't playing Daphne.
Well, it does like I am interested in thinking too, like, okay, when we think about like the real life remakes of these classic movies, like when I think of like the memes behind these movies, I never see like a real life photo. Like I don't see any memes or GIFs from like the Aladdin remake. Like it mainly comes from like the first Aladdin, you know? Or like I am curious to like see where it goes, right? Because like it's not like, oh, live character actors like can't have online fandoms, but like it does, I feel like it does change how people interact with them online. Okay, so just going through some of the comments here. Someone brought up Treasure Planet, which you wrote about recently.
I did write about Treasure Planet. I love Treasure Planet.
I saw it one time and then like forgot about it, but then was looking back at your article and I was like, oh yeah, its animation style is very striking.
Yeah, my big argument with Treasure Planet is one of those things that like Disney invested a lot of money in it, and it just didn't do well. And like some people have attributed that to like the fact that it came out the same weekend as Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. But I think it has more to do with the fact that like audiences were just like not really into like kind of more serious animation at that point, and I think they were like trying to figure out what they wanted next. And I think Treasure Planet was also just like a really weird concept. And so if you're a parent buying a ticket for a kid movie, you're not going to be like, this is a steampunk movie in space. Like, what is this? But then it is one of those things that kids, like, they either got the DVD or like found it somewhere and then just like grew up watching, and it became like a huge favorite. And like so many people my age are just like so into it because we watched it over and over again.
Which, that reminds me too, like, I feel like Atlantis has really kind of similar vibes to it. Which also, I feel like I grew up visually seeing a lot of that movie represented like on Tumblr and other places, mainly because like I really like Milo as a character. But like the character design was really cool in that movie, and like I feel like that really stuck out. But like that seemed to sort of hit a little better for whatever reason, like long term and back then. But also I just feel like it can just be up to like, oh, what VHS, what DVD ended up in my family's home. So then I watch it.
I know. It's like it's so skewed with all these things because like everyone I know who I've told El Dorado was a critical flop and the box office flop is always just so surprised because you always have that like one movie that like I don't know how it found its way into your house, but like you watched it and you think that like this is fantastic. And I love Atlantis, but Atlantis also like it didn't do as well, it didn't do as badly as Treasure Planet did, but it like didn't do well. It didn't do well critically either. And which is a shame. And it was supposed to have a TV series that spun off of it, where the characters like went on like they went to around the world and like they explored like folklores and legends to like each different region, which would have been like really cool. But because the movie didn't do well, they scrapped the series, and the 3 episodes that they had, they made into like a direct-to-DVD sequel. But yeah, it's a shame because Atlantis has like one of the most diverse casts in a Disney movie up until that point.
I never even really realized that, but yeah, I guess like you're right. Like it's super interesting to see like contemporary discourse of like, oh wow, like a lot of praise for Disney for like sort of representation, you know, like with Coco or with Moana, like they're really starting to like think about, you know, incorporate, but it's like, that's, you know, is it just sort of like this amnesia? Like we did have, you know, various identities, like, you know, in animation beforehand. Like it's funny that people say that because it's like, well, you know, I feel like a lot of Disney movies have had like non-white people in them for a while. Whether that's like problematic or not is like another question. Let's see here. So Groffle Waffles is wondering, I'm not sure if you've covered this, but Disney has like a sequelitis issues. I know that they are a business and want to make money, but sometimes they have to let stuff stand alone.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think you see it especially after Disney acquired DreamWorks, like officially, like 100% own them, and that's when you start getting like all these Pixar sequels, which don't like. I will say Toy Story 2 is like one of my favorite Pixar movies, but I think like all the Pixar sequels that have been like under the Disney banner haven't quite held up to their originals, especially like Cars did not need 2 sequels. Are you sure? Like, are you sure? Toy Story 4 was like fine. Monsters University, enjoyable. Did it need to exist? Probably not. But like they definitely. It's the same thing with their live action remakes, is that it is easy money because people will go see them until they start getting bad, which they haven't. They're not bad. They're just like fine.
Well, you're like, you know, this isn't going to be like, you're not going to whiff it completely because you're putting so much money behind this and you're putting all this work behind it. So like it can only, I say this like knock on wood, it can only be so bad, right?
Right. Like at worst, they're usually just like forgettable. Like the live action Lion King, which was just, you know, like computer graphically animated. Like it's just literally a shot-by-shot remake, but everything looks slightly real. And I think I almost fell asleep during it, which is sad because it's like literally the same movie just not as
not as well crafted. Yeah. The Rainsword said, "I'm just glad Incredibles never got a sequel. Winky face, winky face, winky face." That's actually I feel like one of my favorite Disney sequels, I would say. What's your favorite?
One of my, like, the better ones, in my opinion. Just The Incredibles is my favorite Pixar movie, so, like, it's just seeing more of the characters and the family dynamic was fun for me, even if it, like, didn't have the same highs as the first one.
The first one. Would you say then, like, is that also your favorite sequel? Do you have a favorite sequel?
My favorite sequel is Toy Story 2.
Toy Story 2,
absolutely.
Okay.
I just, like, Toy Story was, like, a good... I like Toy Story 2 more than Toy Story. And once again, I don't know if this is the case, if that was the one I had on VHS, so that is the one I watched.
You just watched,
But I think, just, like, upon revisiting them as an adult, Toy Story, like, really interrogates that concept of what if toys are alive, which is fun. But then Toy Story 2 puts stakes on that, of, like, you're going to outlive and outgrow your toys are going to outlive you while you outgrow them, and just kind of, like, really drills down into that and, like, gives you an existential crisis, and it's devastating, but I love it.
Well, I think it does get at this, like, it's like primal / childlike feeling of, like, oh, I don't want to leave behind childhood. I don't want to think about, like, life changing. It's, like, very nostalgic, but then deeply sad. Unless you find, like, some sort of greater meaning in it. Like, life is cyclical. Yep, and you pass the toys on. That's not a horrible thing. And so, let's see here. So just going through some of the comments here. Give us Coco too, you cowards. I mean, yeah, true. That's the thing. I feel like I would eat up a Coco sequel, even though I don't, again, like, I feel like
Coco's just such a gorgeously crafted story. I don't even know what they could do to expand upon it.
Yeah.
Unless Miguel also dies.
Okay, so you go, it's 50 years, Miguel dies, crosses the border, and then his son does the exact same thing, and it's basically the same movie, but then people cry. I mean, Leah Fionn asks, thoughts on Epic? I actually I'm not super familiar with that movie.
That's the Blue Sky one. I watched it on a plane. I will say it is one of those movies that is also, like, it's has, like, a very passionate small fandom on Tumblr. I know a friend who role played Mary Kate in that movie. And it's one, I think it's I mean, I haven't watched it in years, but I do remember it being, like, very gorgeous. And it's a shame that Blue Sky hasn't, like, been able to do much in a while. But I really dug the concept of it. It had, like, that sort of, like, Disney fairies thing. But, like, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with the Tinkerbell series that had, like, a bunch of, like, made-for-TV movies.
No.
But, like, yeah, no, I haven't watched them, but I know that they're, like, they just sort of, like, really expand this world of, like, this Pixie Hollow. But I feel like Epic really had, like, pulled that concept off a little bit before that. I don't know the timelines of this, so, like, don't take my word on that. But I do remember, like, there were those slugs in the movie. Was Beyonce there? I can't remember. Someone, I need to look that up.
She could have been there.
There was, like, a beautiful fairy queen. I do remember it. She was very ethereal, and I don't know if that's just my image of Beyonce or if, like, someone else was in the movie.
Yeah.
But please correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, it's fine. Like, we don't need to do fact checking on the spot here. Yeah. I think actually, Petrana, sorry to inform you, Beyonce's PR is in the stream chat right now, and is very upset.
I'm honestly, I think
once you figure that out,
it was
Beyonce. Okay, all right, we're ending the show now. Petrana has.
I did it. I won.
Fact checking queen also got it right the first time. Trust but verify. All right, I have a very controversial question to ask now. I actually don't know if it is. Emperor's New Groove, very underrated or most underrated? So underrated or overrated?
I think it's definitely underrated. It's hilarious, and I think a lot of people forget that. Like, so much of the Emperor's New Groove. So, for a little backstory, I wrote about this a column ago in my column. Mm-hmm. The production to Emperor's New Groove was like a trash fire. It was so bad. Like, there's a documentary floating around YouTube called The Sweatbox, if you would like to like really get a deep dive into this. But like, it was just ridiculous because what happened was the guy who directed The Lion King was like really gung-ho about making this like a big, sweeping, romantic, mystical project that really tapped into like the native culture, which like it's one of those things where I'm just like, I don't think I would have trusted this man to do it because he was white, and like the entire cast is white.
Yeah,
but then like it just wasn't testing well with audiences because it was too serious and too many things were going on, and like it was just not doing well. And so the higher ups are just like, hey, like we like need to fix this. So they hired another guy, and then this guy was just like, I want to make a funny movie. And so they were basically making two movies at once, and like finally it got to the point where like the guy who was doing like the funny version, the test audiences were like, this is great, and then they were just like, what the heck is going on with the other one, which had like 5 more characters and like a huge plot. It was supposed to be like a Prince and the Pauper style thing where Cusco switches places with like a peasant, and then but still gets turned into a llama.
Yeah.
And so eventually they were like, we kind of need to make it like a funny movie. Yeah. And then the guy who had originally started it was like, I don't want to make this movie if it's not going to be my movie. And so he left, and he was really upset about it. And so then the guy who ended up taking over as director, he really was inspired by Looney Tunes and like all this like physical comedy.
Yeah.
So that's what like one of the things Emperor's New Groove is like really good at is like comedic timing and just like really like goofs that you would think of when you think of like Bugs Bunny and stuff. There's that scene in the restaurant, which is, I think, just amazing, where they're like, they have all these like near misses with each other, and they're like making the orders, and it's really funny. And that's the movie that ended up getting made. And the thing is, it was supposed to be a musical before, so they had Sting. Like, he wrote like 6 songs for this thing, and then when they were like, "Oh, JK, we're not using any of your songs,"
are they released anywhere?
I think there's some on like the official like soundtrack to the movie. They used one of his songs, and then he was like, I don't think I should be the one singing this because I'm too old for like this new funky like tone that you have here. And then so they got, I think they got, forgot who they got, but it was someone who was older than Sting.
I can just imagine though, like this director has like this grand vision for this movie and then makes 6 songs, and they come back and they're like, but what if we made the characters go mix squeaker, mix squeaks, and like...
I feel so bad for that original director because he's spoken out since then. He's just like, I can't, like, they kept just enough of it that he can't take the idea anywhere else, which sucks. But also, I do very much enjoy the current movie as it came.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a good comedy. I don't know. I really like Emperor's New Groove. And to an extent that now that I think about it, I feel like that really informed a lot of my current comedic taste. I watch it over and over and over. And, I think some of the first memes that I sort of came in counter with or saw on like places like 9gag, because I feel like the first times that I consumed memes regularly was scrolling on 9gag with my friends, and like a lot of them were Kronk memes. Because like that Kronk is funny character, and so it's like that humor also I feel like really carried on. I don't know, and now I'm like, oh, I should rewatch it. Let's see here. The Vacuum Ride, Lampy Getting Stuck, Dark Crystal is great. I haven't seen Dark Crystal. That's the puppet.
That's the Jim Henson one. Yeah, I have not seen that either. I know there's a new Netflix show that I've heard is very good.
Yeah, and I started the Netflix show, but then realized like, oh, I'm not ready to get into like a big, like do the work that it takes to get into a big fantasy world right now. Like, I think like I had just finished like watching Game of Thrones or something, and I was like, I can't.
Time to take a break.
Groffle Waffle says you must watch the original movie. So I have, but I don't remember any of it. Mainly because like everyone, like I had heard so many people tell me like, oh, you know, like watch Dark Crystal, watch Dark Crystal, watch Dark Crystal. I was a kid, and people was my mom, actually. My mom made me watch it. Let's see here. We got Fern Gully. I feel like we're just sparking up like all these sort of like animated shows. Yeah. Like I'm trying to
Gully.
There's Fern Gully, Little Toaster Goes to Mars. I just remember watching Iron Giant and crying, and my mom being like, why is this movie you're watching on the television making you cry? Like a little concerned. Also don't remember what that's about.
It's so good. It is like just a genuinely good movie that definitely deserved better. So fun fact about the Iron Giant, it was also a box office flop.
And did it ever? I feel like that one's still really buried. Like,
yeah, no. Well, see, the thing about that one is that it's one of those ones that you can actually pinpoint a clear reason as to why it was a box office flop, and it is because Warner Animation did not give it any marketing and did not even give it like an actual release date till like a few months before. And with Iron Giant, they realized immediately, like after it came out and all these critics were like, this is amazing. And they were just like, oh, maybe we should have like made more than one poster for this. They only had one poster, and it was like the like preview, like, oh, hey, is this okay? And then they were like, yeah, sure. And they just like didn't improve it. So that was the poster for the movie. So they did go big on the home release for that one, which is why it has this like huge following, and it's considered a cult classic because it did not do well at box office. It was critically like everyone loved it, and then it just sort of gained a following. And also they did this thing where they allowed cable networks to play it a lot, and so it was like just always on television, especially during holidays. So if you watched it as a kid, you probably watched it either on your like VHS or like just on TV, because it was apparently always on.
Yeah. No, I think I watched it on cable one time, like during Thanksgiving or something, like some random Thanksgiving special where they play like a roundup of movies, and like I feel like Iron Giant was like somehow always included in whatever they were playing. So sort of like shifting gears here, I'm curious to talk to you more about like the fandoms that surround some of these movies. And we could pick something like more specific that like either, you know, like you feel like you participate in that fandom or you just like have observed it. Cause I'm kind of curious, cause like, I think one thing that's really different, like thinking about, like video games and the fandoms that surround video games, is that for me, it sort of feels like the age group is a lot more consolidated with video games. Like it's kind of like, okay, like 18 to mid 30-year-olds, you know, maybe I'm off. Maybe someone can correct me on that. But then like with Disney movies, like it is like, oh, 5-year-old can watch this to like, I know like Disney adults. I feel like that's a thing.
Disney adults is absolutely.
Wait, okay. Talk to me about Disney adults, Petrana.
Well, see, the thing is, there's like people who appreciate like there's like Disney theme park adults are just like a different class of like commitment, because it's just like there are people who like. So I know I'm from Florida, so I know a lot of people who have like annual passes and stuff and visit quite frequently, and it makes sense to me if you're in Florida, because like you don't have to pay for a plane or even a hotel sometimes. But like there are people who like are just like so committed to like going to Disney like so often, and it's like a whole lifestyle. I found this lady on TikTok, and her entire house is like Disney decorated. Yeah, and like it's a lot, and it looks really cool. And like honestly, props to her, because a lot of the stuff she does are like DIY. Like, she like installed like faucets on her sink that look like GD lamp handles.
Oh my goodness!
But it's like a lot, and there are people who are like so really into Disney and like don't really think critically about like, wow, this is a giant media conglomerate. But then like, and then there are people who just like the movies and want to like share them with their kids and stuff. But Disney adults are definitely
Well, and I will say, I can say, oh, Disney adults, but I'm not as far from that world. It's like, I grew up in Florida. Like, my parents' favorite movie was like Beauty and the Beast. So I grew around like Beauty and the Beast stuff, like figurines and like stuff.
I have a Frozen 2 Frozen
right?
So like, I can't really. It's like. it's one of those things where, like, I definitely don't want to, like, critique people for being passionate about something, because if you're passionate about something, that's, like, props to you. But I do think, like, if you're on that line where you're just like, I'm going to go to Disney World right now and I deserve to, then I think you really need to reconsider a lot of your priorities.
Yeah. Well, and it is like, there's different levels of it, I guess. Are there, I'm like, we don't need to talk about this a ton, but since like it is like sort of looking at the internet angle of this, are there like places online, like people who don't live in Florida who will hang out, like doing, I don't know, participating in like Disney fandom stuff? Or is it like, is it more control?
It's definitely like, it depends on like what you're looking out of the, like what part of the fandom are you? Because it, like saying Disney fandom is like, it's just like a huge blanket thing, of like, yeah. Are you MCU? Are you an annual pass holder? I have a friend who is in a bunch of annual pass holder Facebook groups, and they're like very committed, and they like share updates of like back when the parks were like actually like safe. It would be like, wow, there are new hedges on this corner of Main Street, and they were like super into those details. So you have those fans, and you have there's like a whole community dedicated to Disney bounding, which I don't know if you know, but if you're like over the age of, I forgot what the exact age is, but you can't wear a costume in the parks because they don't want little kids confusing you for
their official mascots,
they want to maintain the illusion that there's like one Elsa, there's one Cinderella, and so you can't like be an adult and walk around. But people still want to dress up, so there's a whole community of Disney bounders where they like create outfits that like kind of evoke the color scheme of a character. So you can like dress up as the character without actually dressing up as the character, and that's like a whole other community. There's like Disney influencers on Instagram, and that's like this is still like very park centered. And then you get like into like fandoms where like appreciate like the anime, like the movies and stuff. You'll have like people who will like edit fan edits of movies. If you like AMVs on YouTube, where people will like make crossover videos of these characters from completely different movies, and the editing is just so good and fluid, you would wonder, like, you would think that this is an actual movie. And like especially people doing like non-Disney and Disney crossovers is super huge. There was like a huge explosion, I think it like right after, like it was How to Train Your Dragon, Rise of the Guardians, which are 2 DreamWorks movies, and then Tangled and Brave, and people made like a huge crossover fandom between the 4 protagonists, and it was called Rise of the Brave Tangled Dragon. And people would draw fan art, they would make videos that were like really good edits, like you would not be able to tell that this was not like an official thing. And then like it got to, then when Elsa came, everyone was like, oh my gosh, like Elsa and Jack Frost, or Elsa and like this person. And so that exploded. And then there, like that fandom still exists, but it's gotten to the point where there are just so many like CG animated characters that they can't really chuck them all under that banner. But like you still see these edits crop up. And like I know there's this one creator on Tumblr and YouTube who I'm a huge fan of called the Nameless Doll, and she does like her own, she uses animation from like the 90s and 2000s, and she creates her own stories using these characters as like models, and like cuts all the videos out, and it's really cool. And then you have like fic authors too, like you have people who role play, like I role play Disney stuff, I'm just gonna say that out there. And then it's like, and you have like I remember like when the Back Before Frozen 2 came, like they're also like obviously like Discord communities. There's like a huge Frozen one. I like joined the Discord server because I was curious about it, and like they have like content. They like, these people are so dedicated to finding out like what happens in the new Frozen movie that they were like keeping eye on merch from China and like analyzing like all the details just to figure out.
Do you use them as sources ever? Like
I mean I wanted to like dig more into it, but it was just like one of those things where like there's so much coming out in November, but like it's like definitely in the back of my mind. And, like there is a huge Frozen server out there that people like go really crazy finding info about products and like reading all these books and stuff.
Well, and you know, it's kind of cool. It's cool to see these online communities come up with like such polished work, right? Like whether it's like the fanfic or these sort of animation edits. And it does, like, it is also like ushering in like a new era of like people interested in animation and these forms of storytelling. Like, and we can see that with like, I don't know which specific fandom she was associated with, but Noelle Stevenson from She-Ra, like that was her start, right? I would need to look that up. I don't know. It was like sort of being on Tumblr and like being involved.
She drew like a lot of like Lord of the Rings fan comics.
Okay.
And I think that was like a huge thing for her. I don't know what her Disney association is, but I know she was like a huge fan of like Steven Universe, and that you can like really kind of trace like a lot of the like aesthetic of She-Ra and just like the queer themes like could not have been possible without Steven Universe.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. It's interesting. So Gruffles Waffle says, okay, since you're talking about Disney adults, I think it's important to say that the millennial generation exposure to Disney property is the most it has been since the creation of their business. Due to the rise of at-home media consumption, once these adults have grown up, it has become ingrained into their lives.
Oh, yeah. It's like Disney kind of has like, especially if like post-Renaissance has sort of like very much grown into like, you can literally just like from birth to adulthood have Disney at every phase of your life, and they like very specifically market these products. Like I forgot, I read this somewhere, but it's like obviously like Disney makes sense for like little kids, and then you pivot into like they say Disney princesses are the ideal demographic is up until like age 7, and then they have the Disney Fairies line, which is for you until 11, and then 11 to like 14 is like Disney Channel, and then they like it's like really kind of scary how specific they are with like targeting these demographics.
Yeah.
And
like how do they collect that information?
I know.
Where does it come from? Because they're essentially growing up with their target demographics.
Yeah. And then like, and the thing is, and then you become an adult and you're like, oh, I want to share these movies with my kids. And it's like, it's one of those things where
the cycle is completed.
Yeah. Like as much as I love Disney, it's like, you should like think critically about the media you consume and just be like, oh yeah, like it should not rule your life.
Yeah.
It is a monopoly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what is, I mean, we've been talking a lot about Disney, but it's like, what even is Disney? It's like hundreds of companies.
I know. It's like not just the animated movies. Yeah. It's Marvel. It's Star Wars. It's National Geographic. I get a lot of emails about the National Geographic stuff on Disney Plus. Like it is a lot of things.
So Bob Backward says, got it. I never got super into Disney as a kid, mainly because my rented VHS tapes came mostly from the local library, and the free ones to rent were the B or C tier animated movies. The Disney ones you had to pay for, so we couldn't get those. I mean, I think that that's like a really valid point, like to like, there are plenty of people, and I think about this sort of almost like in games a lot, where it's like my parents didn't buy me games growing up, but I still like played a lot of games, and so I would play like whatever Flash ripoff I could get online, you know. I would, play like free games like Neopets, or not Neopets, but like RuneScape or Club Penguin. And so it is like interesting to see like how subjective, everyone's, and like you were saying, like,
especially like with theme park stuff, like the theme park prices are ridiculous. Like you have to be like, so to bring a family of 5 for like one day in Disney World, it's going to run through like over $500, and that's like you have to come from a certain background of privilege to even experience that, and like that's not even like mentioning travel or lodging or like the thing that I always forgot when I was in college and I was like, oh okay cool, I'm gonna go to Disney, like I saved up money, and then I was like, oh yeah right, you have to pay $20 to park your car, like that's so dumb.
And then it's just like, I mean, the food once you're in there is like overpriced and like not amazing. I, growing up, like it almost seemed like my parents like liked Disney, I think a little more than I did at points, where they would be like, I'd be like, why do I need to wait in an hour to go on It's a Small World? Like it kind of scared me sometimes, some of the stuff too. I was like a very quiet, timid girl. So I was like totally down to like chill, read, watch movies. But then going to Disney World, I'm like, what is going on? Because it does, like, when you're a kid, it feels like you're dreaming constantly. Like it is like on this other level because it's so highly produced. And I haven't even been back there since like the addition of like the Star Wars area, which honestly like looks super dope. Like I want to, but it is like there's so many barriers. And now with COVID, like I'm curious to see like what will happen. Like will there
I
be
know.
like luxury Disney tours, like distance Disney tours, where you pay even more to go, but like you're guaranteed some sort of like safety. I don't know.
Yeah, going, especially like Walt Disney World now is just like such a like you have to like book your fast passes in advance. Like I haven't like actually properly been to Disney since they introduced this like magic band system. Like I went for like work at one point. What's
the magic band system?
Yeah, so like if you stay on property, you get this thing, and like it's like a first thing you have like all your stuff preloaded into it, and you like have your dining reservations preloaded into it, and you have to do this all like months. It just sounds so stressful, and also like something you would have to like have the time to research, and to have the money to do, and it's just not like let's go to Disney. Like even living in Florida, just going let's go to Disney World, just like is not
It's not like a laid back vacation, I guess. Let's say that. And and it's also in Orlando, which is hard to get to. Like just throwing that out there. Like very far from not very far, but like 4-hour drive from Miami, which is like the biggest airport. And then there's like an Orlando airport, I'm guessing that's probably just exists for Disney.
The Orlando airport is honestly just an extension of like every theme park in the area, which means one, they are very polite and like very like just nice there, but two, like how like airports will have like shops. It's like a giant Universal store and a giant Disney store.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Tokyo airport you get in, and it's like Pokemon's there. I think, and what you're getting at is like too, like I do try to think about that with Pokemon. It's like, okay, even though I really, really love Pikachu, it's like, commodifying this cuteness, and like there are like issues behind it, right? Especially, but I guess it's not, to me, since I live in the US, I don't see it as on the same level as Disney, because like I do see as like Pokemon is like very Japan centered, and like Disney as being like very US centered. But then I also grew up in Florida, so like there's that. Because it like occupies such a large space of like the culture there. It's like, when I moved from Florida, like, and I said that I was from there, they'd be like, oh, did you go to Disney? Because like now I'm in Minnesota, and it's like a really, really big deal. Because like when you travel, it's like a much higher sign of prestige if you've gone to Disney. I'm like, oh yeah, like of course, da da da. And it's like, no, it's not like, of course. All right, so I'm just sort of monitoring the chat here. We have around 5 more minutes left. If anyone has like any questions they have for Petrana, related to the topic, not related to the topic. I have one. Did we go over like underrated Disney like most underrated animation? Would you say it's El Dorado or?
I feel like the definitely the dark ages of like any animation. So that's like we're talking like late 90s, early 2000s now. But also I would say like I think it's like late 70s, early 80s Disney also has a bunch of like little gems that people are like really passionate about because they grew up with them, but then like kind of tanked. Yeah, I know people who are like really into the Black Cauldron, which I actually have not watched that one.
I've never watched that.
Yeah, I read the books. I was a huge fan of I don't know how to pronounce this out loud because it is one of those things I've just read. The Chronicles of Priordan by Lloyd Alexander. And so people like, I feel like all these eras where the company was not doing well and animation as a medium was just like floundering a bit at box office are the movies that people kind of grew up with because they really went quickly to home release or they went quickly to playing on television. Yeah. And then that's when you'll find like people who are just like huge fans of these things and will be like, oh man, this was so underrated because they didn't do well at box office.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my sort of like overlooked one that I grew up loving, but then sometimes would find people who were like, wait, I didn't necessarily grow up with that, was Fox and the Hound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that came from that dark era, the first dark era, and that was there's so like a bunch of the directors and animators on that left halfway through the production of that movie because they were like, upset. And then the Don Bluth, who is responsible for like Anastasia and Titan AE, was what like the guy who kind of like led that like revolt, and then he started his own studio.
I rewatched Anastasia recently because I remember watching that as a kid and it terrified me. And then I rewatched it and I was like, wait, there aren't that many ghosts in this. Like, why did this scare me so much as a kid? Because that was an interesting like experiment. I feel like it was like a little edgier. It was historical. We got a little politics sprinkled in, like more so I'd say than like other previous Disney movies, and like
that's a 20th century Fox.
Oh, that's 20th.
So
okay,
that's we want to cash in on the pretty
Disney
girl in a dress singing songs thing. Let's do it on the Russian Revolution, maybe.
Yeah.
If you think about that one for a little too long, it's like I guess they were attributing all of the Russian Revolution to this necromancer, but okay.
Yeah.
But,
they're like, that's an interesting story. We'll go with that.
Yeah. It's fun, though.
Bluth Gang. I don't know Bluth.
Yes. That Don Bluth is the director of Anastasia.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was like, I don't know that movie.
That Thumbelina movie, I don't know if you've seen that one. That one is also, like, one of those that, like, people are, like, really into, even though it was, like, kind of low-key when it came out.
Oh, okay. Fievel Goes West. Mm-hmm. My partner forced me to watch that because he grew up with it. And I had like never seen it before. He's like, we need to watch Fievel. We need to watch Fievel. So I actually am familiar with that one. Land Before Time, incredible. Almost named my new cat Ducky. Was overridden on that decision. You can take that up with my partner, but I was like, I want to name the cat Ducky after Land Before Time because Ducky is like the most lovable character I think in like animation period. But it is interesting too, like I guess like one final thing we could talk about as we sort of wrap up here is like the internet in general has like allowed people to reconnect with these movies, and even doing this today is sort of like an example of that, right? Like how we get together, we talk about these things, and suddenly like all these lights are turning on.
I think that is a key reason I think why the like 2000s movies are particularly popular is because they stream, you can turn them into GIFs very easily, whereas like some of the older ones are a little harder to like access.
Yeah.
And like then the people who grew up with them don't necessarily use the internet in the same way that people who grew up with the 2000s ones use them. But it's like still just talking about these, people are starting to remember all these like movies that like, oh, maybe I was the only one who watched this because I had it on VHS or like I had it on DVD or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, before we tie up today, is there anything else like interesting or fun? Like, did you like learn anything cool recently that surprised you?
There is a very big El Dorado meme group on Facebook called The Road to El Dorado Gold Posting. And so if you are remotely a fan of that movie, it is a great meme group and it's very funny. And one of the animators from the movie just hangs out there and kind of like posts amazing illustrations sometimes. So you should check that out.
That's
if that at
cool.
all sparked you.
And then the movie behind you mentioned the movie that documented, was it The Emperor's New Groove?
Oh yes, the Sweatbox. It is like so Sting, who did the music and got all his music scrapped, only did it because he was like, hey, my wife is a documentary maker, can she document the process of this? So she has like a really behind the scenes look at this.
She made it?
Yeah, she made it.
That's amazing.
Disney legally owns it, does not actually legally have it anywhere, but it is very easy to find links of it if you just
Google it. All right. Well, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to plug to our audience today? Where else can they find you and your work? Because obviously, like if they want to go into anyone for animation, it's you. You have such a deep knowledge. So where can they find you?
So my Twitter handle is pet_Rana because the person who has Petrana has not used their Twitter in years. But I have my latest column entry, which is about Treasure Planet, pinned to my profile. And then that whole series, I've done Emperor's New Groove, Iron Giant. And then the El Dorado piece was kind of like my inspiration for this entire series anyway. So you can find more of my work there. Yeah.
So thanks for coming on today. Thanks for the all our viewers today. And thank you to our Patreon supporters. We wouldn't be able to keep adding content like this if it weren't for you. And if you've been following us, you might have seen that we have a new goal to hit now. And if we hit it, we'll be doing a new show where The MinnMax crew talks about their favorite media rec. So honestly, it'd be something closer to what we talked about today. It would give us an opportunity to sort of talk about new stuff, talk about movies, television, books, podcasts. So thanks to all of our supporters today, and look forward to the next episode. Thank you so much, Petrana.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
All right, bye, everyone.
MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.